Hello, everybody. It's 4 o'clock in Lord. I'm back at 2025, and man, oh man, am we starting off good. It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles, 6 o'clock in Chicago, and it's 7 p.m. in New York City. Hello, everybody. I'm Mad Dog DeCipio. It's a little empty in the studio tonight. The pit bull is down for the count. She's not feeling well. Prayers and well wishes go out to Amelia the pit bull Chapman. We have a special guest joining us tonight, folks. It's our friend Lou Ferrante is joining us very shortly, and he is the author of Borgata, The Rise of Empire. That's a 3-book trilogy that Lou will talk about tonight. I'm hoping to get into especially some current stuff that's happening, mob related in New York with John Gotti Jr. and John Alight. They were arrested recently. In fact, over the Christmas holidays, and it's very interesting. These guys don't like each other, but yet they were seen together, kind of palling around. So I'm wondering if they, like they say in the wrestling terminology, if they're kayfabing everybody. Well, we'll find out. Lou will join us shortly, and of course, we're going to talk about his new book. This is, by the way, the first one. This is Borgata Rise of Empire, Volume 1. There are 2 more to follow this. This is like a veritable history of the American Mafia. And some people actually would even take exception to the term American Mafia. As if you say to people American Mafia, well, oh no, the Mafia is Italian. Not so fast, maybe not. But we'll find out. So listen, how's everybody doing? It's my first show back since before Christmas, and I start off in grand fashion, flubbing my words, forgetting what the hell time it is. But we are on. I have to tell you, man, thank you guys so much for all you do for this show. We are on more than, brace yourself, 17 million. I'm not even shitting you. 17 million subscribers have us now global. We have over 11 million just on Spotify alone. I want you to think about that. We have 11 million subscribers just on Spotify alone. All right. That's pretty heavy to comprehend. But those, if you want to check it out, please go. Those are real numbers. So Pitbull says to me today, I'm not feeling well. I stayed home from work. I'm sick. So we're wishing her well. I don't know what's like, see, if she breaks a fingernail, she's sick. It's a catastrophe. So that's how, Amelia's funny like that. Like she crumbles over like little stuff, So, but it looks like Lou Ferrante is joining us, or trying to anyway. It's just, I know. Lou, can you hear me? I see Lou, but he can't hear me. I see he's trying to get in. Well, we're live, so we're going to have to just roll with it. I'm going to see what's going on with Lou, and let me see what's going on. There's Lou.
Ange, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Lou.
Can you see me?
I cannot. I see a big purple flower.
Okay, hold on. So
you got it, my friend. Take care.
Hey, I think you got me now.
I have a big black screen.
No, you should have me. Hold on. You should have me. I see myself next to you.
Really? Well,
yep, and it says
big black screen. And now a purple flower.
No, after the purple flower disappears, you should see me.
No, I don't. There's not a thing here, Lou.
It says you're in the show. Everyone can see and hear you now. That's what it says in my screen.
All right. Well, let me see if there's something I can do on my end. So don't go anywhere.
I think it's your end. Yeah, Ange.
Let's try this. We'll be right back, folks. Let's. I want to roll commercial and then take care of some stuff. So let's see here.
Hey Max, what's going on? I'm X, and from this moment on, I'm going to be your own personal AI DJ on Spotify. Let's go. Up next, I know you've been on a summer song kick lately, so I went back for some of your old summertime favorites. See if it warms you up. Next up, some of the music you had on a lot back in 2018.
Do you think of me? Walking out there.
All right, Max, let's get you out of your feels and switch up the vibe. You've been into dance music lately. I got this brand new release to get you moving. Introducing DJ, the best of Spotify made just for you, one tap away. Powered by AI, delivered by me, your very own DJ.
And there's Lou Ferrante. How are you, Lou?
Hey, good. How you doing, Ange?
I'm wonderful, brother. Apparently, it was on my end. How about that one?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And it was a new device that you used to sign in, right? I think StreamYard or something.
Yes.
Yeah, because I didn't remember that from last time. So it was a little tricky.
Yeah.
I'm not that tech savvy.
Either am I. Let me tell everybody who's here with me. Lou Ferrante is a returning guest. He's a friend of mine. Lou is an expert in hijacks and heists, having done a few in his time and having done time for doing some time.
Quite a few and quite a bit of time, too.
Yes, sir. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Let me introduce everybody to the trilogy. This is the Borgata trilogy, Rise of Empire.
That's actually the first one, Ange. This is the new one out.
Yep, that's book number 2 that Lou holds in his hand. Mm-hmm. I don't have that copy yet, but I'm sure you'll get me one.
Mm-hmm.
That is when there are 3. We should tell people there are going to be 3.
Yes,
these are the first 2.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about the first couple anyway.
Okay.
The third one is still yet a mystery to me. First of all, my friend, how the hell are you?
I'm good. It's great to talk to you. Happy New Year to you and your listeners.
Thank you, and my best to you guys. It's been a while since we had you here. Well, not since the release of Borgata.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, and I wanted to ask you right off the top, one of the things that I found out today in doing some research, and it was fascinating to me, the 2 most popular genre of book, the Mafia and the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, wow.
And not necessarily mutually exclusive either.
Yeah, that's great. Exactly. I bring it all together in volume 2.
And we're going to talk about that. I found out something, and I'll let the conversation become natural because there's a lot I want to talk about. The first book, Lou, was really a multi-layer introduction to the mob, to yourself. You introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are. And then you get right into naming names and places and how this thing of ours, this Cosa Nostra, came to be.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just recap book 1, and then let's seamlessly go into book 2.
Okay.
Book 1 here, as I said, multi-layered introduction. Was it necessarily important for you to lay that intro as the groundwork? And what was your hope in doing so?
Well, I'm an avid reader. As you can see, I'm in one of my libraries right now. And I love reading. And what frustrates me is when I pick up a history, let's say, for example, of the Roman Empire, and it begins with Augustus Caesar or Julius Caesar, or it begins with Scipio Africanus, I become so frustrated because I want to know how the Romans began, where they came from. Did they just appear out of thin air and suddenly there was the Colosseum and there were aqueducts? Or how did they start? And that's what I always look for when I grab a history. I want to see the foundations of how something started. And that was what I wanted to do in this trilogy. That's why I approached it very, very carefully, laying the groundwork as to how the mafia began in Sicily. What were the socioeconomic reasons, and what was the environment like? Why did it occur? When did it occur? So many people I found have so many things so wrong. A lot of people say it was from the 12th or 13th century it started, and then all of a sudden it disappears for 700 years. You know, I mean, I really, when it came about was the unification of Italy, is when Sicily was sucked into Italy as part of they became part of Italy. And I'm full Italian, but I'm from different parts of Italy, my family. And my Sicilian grandmother would be the first one to tell you, I'm not Italian, I'm Sicilian. She still doesn't feel like she's Italian. She's a Sicilian. And it's very different. And
can you differentiate that? Because there are people, I've actually seen this happen. I'm not even bullshitting you. I've actually seen people get into fisticuffs over this.
Yeah. Yep.
They've gotten in physical altercations of Sicilian, the Italian.
That's right. Yep. So my grandmother, she's just an example of how many Sicilians always felt. They felt it was their own tiny island, their own culture, their own language, and they really, they had their own way of doing things, and they had been sort of the subjects of all these conquering nations throughout history, and they felt like Italy was just their most recent conqueror. Many Sicilians felt, and there was always a separatist movement in Sicily to break away from Italy throughout the 20th century, and one may very well exist today on a smaller scale. But that said, my father, who spoke Baresi, and my mother's father, who spoke Nablidan, could barely speak. They couldn't speak with my grandmother, who spoke a dialect of Sicilian. They all spoke different dialects, so they could barely speak to each other in Italian. They had to speak in English when they wanted to talk to each other. So that's how different it was. And the Sicilians were very proud all the time. And all of a sudden, when the unification of Italy occurs in the 1860s, that's when Italy proper, originally governed out of they were governed out of Rome. And the Roman government says, well, look, you're going to have to fall in line. And the people who are doing things a certain way over there, we don't approve of it. That's criminal conduct. And that's when these people were first, the little Don in the piazza, or the little leader of the village who hung out in the piazza all day and called the shots. He was suddenly a criminal, called a criminal by Italy proper. And that's when the mafia started to suddenly emerge. You start to see this secret society come from nowhere. And in 1860s Sicily. And I traced that up to 1960s America in the first one.
Lou, how did they go from being a protective organization to an ambivalent organization?
And how do you mean by protective to ambivalent?
Well, my understanding is that the Sicilian mafia, which was indicated by a literal black hand on your storefront or your place of employment, that if you had this black hand, that you were protected, quote unquote, protected, because you paid a royalty or protection money.
Yeah. So I did a deep dive into the whole black hand thing, which was very interesting because most people do believe, and it was somehow connected to the mafia at one point. And I'll tell you where that came from. So at some point, there's a huge immigrant wave into the United States of Sicilians and Italians, mostly Southern Italians. And they're coming here to seek a better life. But the United States desperately needs cheap labor. And they want the Italians. The Italian laborers were the hardest working laborers in the country at the time. And everybody said that across the country. Everybody said, you hire Italian, it's like hiring 4 or 5 men, one Italian. They couldn't believe how these people worked. And at some point or another, the Italians started to shake each other down a little. because they were living in ghettos and tenements, and that sort of morphed into a lot of people mimicking it, and they would call themselves the mafia. But the real mafia really wasn't doing that, except for now and then getting in on it. They would get in on it. They'd say, well, you know what? If you could shake down Caruso, the singer, by sending him a letter and telling him, give us 25,000, why not try? But really, they were never really the Black Hand. It was more so a Borgata. And that's why I named it the Borgata trilogy. More so like a family. They came to this country and they really literally followed the hardworking, honest Italian immigrants who came to this country and wanted a better life. Those immigrants, wherever they went to a new place, for example, if they went to Louisiana and settled in New Orleans, if they settled in New York, the mafia saw an opportunity to be amongst their own kind and to capitalize on that environment. Because a bunch of Italians who just got off the boat couldn't go up to a bunch of Germans and say, hey, we want 500 a week. The Germans would have said, let's get together and push back. So, they had to prey on their own kind at first.
Lou, tell everybody how the term La Borgata became Borgata.
It was basically, Borgata is almost like the Spanish term barrio. It's it's thought of as like a poorer collection of people in a poorer neighborhood. And that's the original meaning of the term. And then eventually, even in my time, we would say the Borgata or the Brugade. We would refer to a family. We wouldn't necessarily say a crime family. We would say, let's say if you're with John Gotti's family, they would say Louis with John's Brugade or Borgata. That's how they would say it. So it became sort of just a name for a clique of, a family, a crime family.
I thought it was interesting that the Borgata Casino is about 40 minutes from where I am right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know how they took that name. It's completely opposite.
I was going to ask you about that. It just seems so counter what you would think Borgata would mean.
Spending $100,000 at a blackjack table, or
right.
I don't know how that makes sense with Borgata, but yeah.
So let's talk about Volume 2 now. Having not the advantage of having Volume 2 in front of me, I am solely and completely at your will, my friend.
Oh, that's great. I apologize. I thought my sincerest apologies. I did think the publicist sent you a copy. That's it. Once again, for your viewers / listeners, listeners hopefully could access it. It's on Amazon.com. You could get it anywhere. Borgata trilogy. Clash of Titans is the second volume. And what happens in the second volume is, after I traced the meteoric rise from 1860s Sicily to 1960 America. Volume 2 begins where it's the first time the mob is encountering pushback especially from law enforcement and politicians, and especially of that, Bobby Kennedy. What happened is, Bobby Kennedy comes onto the scene. Wants to make a name for himself. And the Kennedy.
He made a name for himself, brother.
Boy, did he. Yeah, did he. And I got to tell you, I'm going to fast forward. Obviously, everybody knows this already, but before I tell you the origins of Bobby's fight with the mob, what's interesting to me is the people he fought most viciously in court, trying to deport them, trying to arrest them, trying to destroy their lives, they died in ripe old age of natural causes, whereas Bobby and Jack died with a bullet in the head, each of them. That's the irony. It's great irony. I mean,
the real irony for me, it's blaringly obvious, is that the people who helped his brother become president were the Italians.
That's exactly right, Ange. So Angelo,
and he hauled them, like cattle carts,
exactly right, Angelo. And that's where
you could get them to the boat.
Yeah, and that's why they felt double crossed. So just to give you in a nutshell, it's like just a quick 1 minute in a nutshell.
Oh, Bobby take your time, brother.
Okay, great. Bobby goes after them in the McClellan Committee. He starts to attack the Teamster Union and how it was mafia infested, because they ran all the locals across the country. So Jimmy Hoffa eventually takes over after Dave Beck gets taken down by Bobby. He was connected to the mob. You couldn't be the Teamster president without the mob's backing. They controlled the major locals in Chicago and New York, and those are the people that have to cast their votes at the Teamster presidential election. So, I mean, you can't become the Teamster president. So Bobby goes after the Teamsters and tries to connect them to the mob. And then at the same time, he's going after every mob boss in America. And he drags them before the McClellan Committee, also dubbed the Rackets Committee, because he was trying to destroy the rackets.
Yeah.
And he makes a name for himself. And he insists that Jack Kennedy, become part of that committee. Whereas originally now, Joe Kennedy Sr., the patriarch of the Kennedy clan, says to his sons, no, don't do this. You'll ruin your name. You can't go against labor. If you want to be president, which I want you to be, because Joe Sr. wanted them to be president, wanted all his kids in the White House at one point or another. But Jack was up next after Joe Jr. died in World War II. So Jack, he wants in the White House. Bobby's going to help him get in there. And Joe Kennedy tells him, don't go after labor and be careful with the mob. And the reason why was Joe Kennedy has a long history of relationships with mobsters across the country. So one is, and this wasn't, I did a deep dive. If you read my book, Ange, when you read it, you'll see I heavily sourced my book. I got 50 pages of source notes in the back. I didn't take anything, lightly. I didn't just shoot stuff out there. Everything is sourced.
Well, this one, I got this thing inside and out, brother. We could talk about this all day.
Awesome. We should do that. We should come back to that one day.
Absolutely. Oh my God,
I'd love to. So basically, Joe Kennedy during the Prohibition was bootlegging with mobsters, and this testimony does not come from mobsters alone. It comes from members of the Kennedy clan. It comes from friends of the family. It comes from judges. It comes from law enforcement officials, FBI agents. Everybody.
Yeah, he made a great fortune on the backs of rum runners and used the mob to do it. Absolutely, of course.
That's right.
It's a convenient. I want to put it this way. It's an inconvenient truth that people don't want to remember, particularly some members that still have the name Kennedy, and there are quite a few that are still around.
That's right, and that's why I sourced all of the any testimony. It's in there where it comes from, and also too. Then at one point he had like a second-rate Hollywood company. He was making like second-rate movies in Hollywood, and again he's embedded with the mob because you can't make a movie in Hollywood without having labor relations, and you need to have a relationship with the mob to make sure that all of those problems are settled. All of the labor racketeers, they're all going to come looking for you and say,
all union. Hollywood is all union.
Correct. So that was
you're not going to get a picture made for everybody from gaffers, cast and crew, major stars, even one-bit players are a member of the union.
That's correct.
So nobody's going to make a movie without at least 4 or 5 unions being involved.
That's correct. And you have to imagine
just the way it is.
Yep. And it's not like today where, the federal government has, keeps a close watch on these unions. Back then, the mob had complete control of those unions.
Oh, yeah.
So you weren't operating in Hollywood without having a mobster somewhere, that you had to befriend and take care of. So that said, Joe Kennedy knows he's close with the mob. But at some point after the Rackets Committee, he tries to talk them out of it. The two boys, Jack and Bobby, still go in. They still hold these hearings. They still make a name for themselves. And the mob they are infuriated. However, at some point or another, Joe Kennedy convinces the mob. He says, when Jack declares his candidacy for president, Joe Kennedy convinces the mob, his own friends, and he convinces a lot of other ones through his chief liaison, Frank Sinatra. He says, let them know my kids are done chasing mobsters. They made a name for themselves. It's a stepping stone. We get into the White House. My kids are going to deal with other issues like civil rights for African Americans, the nuclear arms race during the Cold War, reining it in. So this is what we're going to do. We're done with mobsters. And Senator Esty Scifalva in the past, Thomas Dewey, who became the governor of New York, all of these people did use the mob as stepping stones and moved on. So the mob had no reason to believe the Kennedys would not move on. However, once Jack won and Jack pulled out, I cite all my sources. There's tremendous evidence that the West Virginia primary, the Democratic West Virginia primary, where Jack ran against Hubert Humphrey, tons of mob money, millions of dollars was dumped into the West Virginia primary to help Jack pull it out. And Jack needed that money. It was a crucial moment in the campaign where he may have lost it. He loses West Virginia. He could have lost the whole thing. So the mob dumps money into West Virginia. And then a lot of investigations into that money that went in there were halted at the last minute. Next is the general election against Richard Nixon. Chicago, Illinois, Kennedy needed to pull. He needed to win Illinois. Chicago was controlled by Sam Giancana, was the acting boss of the Chicago mob at the time. They controlled the 11th ward, the 28th ward. They controlled a few other wards where if you could swing those to Kennedy, you could pull it out. And they also owned Mayor Daley. Mayor Daley was in their pocket. Mayor Daley was a close friend of presidential nominee Jack Kennedy at the time. So the mob pulls out Illinois for him. They win the election by the narrowest margin. I think one of the narrowest, if not the narrowest margin ever against Nixon. And Jack surprises everybody and appoints Bobby Attorney General. Now, the reason why, I read a million different reasons, and I finally came to the one that made the most sense. And once again, tremendous amount of testimony with it. Joe Kennedy was terrified that any other attorney general might look into the election and find all the fraud that took place with the mob money and the mob's help. So he says the only one we could trust is your own brother. Bobby must be appointed attorney general. So Jack puts in Bobby, and now Bobby, that's fine. Okay, no problem for the mob. He's going to make sure that there's no, that's good for us actually, because we helped Kennedy in. Now, all the mob wanted was a free hand for 4 years. Hopefully 8. We don't want to be bothered for the next 4 to 8 years.
Lou, why didn't Bobby get the memo?
Exactly. He didn't. And that's what I go through.
He didn't get the memo.
And I got to tell you, Ange, I say it over and over. I walked away from all my research with a tremendous affinity for Jack. Jack was an easygoing guy. There are people out there who hated Jack Kennedy. I know that. But as a person, he was charismatic. He was easygoing. He didn't care if Bobby went after the mob or didn't. It was Bobby. Bobby had this real chip on his shoulder. And as soon as he becomes attorney general, he starts going after the mob. And he picks up where he left off with the Rackets Committee. And he's creating enemies every which way he turns. And I source it all in the book. He creates enemies with Lyndon Johnson, who becomes the vice president. He creates enemies with J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI. He creates enemies with just about every law enforcement agency in America. He's fighting with them all because he wants them all to sign on and go after the mob. So now at some point or another, the mob, and by the way, Kennedy was also promising, as you remember in volume 1, they were thrown out of Cuba. Kennedy was promising during the general election with Nixon. Kennedy pretty much promised that he would be hard on Cuba and get it back. And that was sort of like, it was a false promise because he dropped the ball at the Bay of Pigs and he dropped it again at the Mississippi.
Big time. But drop the ball.
Big time. Yeah, big time.
My God.
Big time.
Well, the one thing that he mishandled epically was Lyndon Johnson, his vice president.
That's right.
The one person, the single politician who carried the entire South was Lyndon Johnson. He was beloved in the South.
That's right. That's right.
Kennedy, on the other hand, conversely, wasn't liked at all in the South. In fact, you mentioned a moment ago the narrowest margin in presidential history. That still stands today and may, and I think history will prove me right, it may be usurped by the Biden-Trump election. It may be. I believe it will, but I digress. Kennedy's ace in the hole. His ace in the hole was Lyndon Johnson. But he mishandled Lyndon so epically, so failingly.
Not only that, Ange, how about this?
Man.
It gets even worse, and I outlined it in the book.
And then Bobby opens his mouth, and Jesus,
Bobby goes after Lyndon to the point where when they're campaigning for in 63, when Jack is campaigning, he decides, him and Bobby decide they want Johnson off the ticket in 64. So at that point, Bobby, it's not enough to just tell Lyndon to get off the ticket because he won't go quietly. So what Bobby does is he starts indicting everyone around Johnson. So he first indicts Billy Sol Estes, who was a guy who was involved in these multi-million-dollar agricultural schemes down in Texas, where that was Johnson's home state. And he got Estes back to the wall. And Estes is going, what the hell are they doing? and he's doing it to compromise Johnson. Then he goes after Bobby Baker, who was Johnson's main aide when he was Master of the Senate. Johnson, he was his main congressional aide, Bobby Baker. He goes and starts, he indicts Billy Sol Estes, Bobby does. Then he indicts Bobby Baker, and it's all to get Johnson to compromise him. So at some point or another, either Time or Life magazine did a multi-part series they were preparing to release. And that multi-part series was basically saying how dirty Johnson was, and how the editors of the magazine said not only was he going to get knocked off the ticket, but Bobby ensured that he was going to jail. That's where he was going. So everything hinged. Johnson, everything hinged. I never said, because I don't have the evidence to say Johnson was guilty in any way. However, I do tell you the facts, which is, had those bullets not rang out in Dealey Plaza, Johnson would not have been the 36th president of the United States. He probably would have been inmate 36.
I have a film that I'm going to send you, Lou. It's called, I saw it today, and I have to, and knowing that we were going to talk about this, I have to send it to you. It's called Solving the Crime of the Century. Freedom of Information Act FOIA requests were submitted for this film. All of them granted. All of them granted. Nothing redacted. Which is remarkable, because you're going to hear in this film Lyndon Johnson carry on a conversation with Jacqueline Kennedy shortly after Kennedy is killed in Dallas, and Jackie and the new president are talking like they're bosom buddies. He's telling her, "You got to come here, put your arms around me, let me, we'll talk, and we'll go for a walk in the backyard." I mean, I've never heard this shit. It sounds like less comforting than more like he's coming on to her.
Well, he was a rake, Johnson. He was with he slept with a lot of women, Johnson.
Oh yeah, for sure.
He doesn't get the Kennedys have the name for that. Johnson doesn't as much, but Johnson may have been as bad or worse. Yeah, I mean, Johnson was,
I'm going to get you a copy of this film. It's called Solving the Crime of the Century.
Okay.
And you've never heard this stuff before. I promise you, you never heard it.
So getting back to where we were before with Bobby. So at some point or another, the mob says, "Look, let's grab Joe Kennedy and tell him to rein in Bobby. Joe's the boss. He's the patriarch of the Kennedy clan. The sons listen to him. We'll tell Joe Kennedy, rein in Bobby. Enough is enough now." And just as they're preparing to go talk to Joe Kennedy, December 1961, Joe Kennedy plays a round of golf, Palm Beach, goes home, and suffers a major stroke. And he's debilitating stroke. He's done. He's done. He's finished. So at that point, as Gore Vidal said, author Gore Vidal said, who was a relative of the Kennedy clan, Kennedy family, he said, had Joe Sr. not gotten that stroke, he would have solved the problem with the mafia in 2 minutes. And Gore Vidal is spot on when he said that, because Joe Kennedy would have said, "Bobby, back off," and that's the end of it. Now, he might have had a little bit of a fight with Bobby, but ultimately they listened to their father. And they knew that the father was the one who put them in there in the White House.
Why was it that, particularly Bobby, throughout his entire career, even if you listen to his son today, RFK Jr., he knows what got his father killed. It was his mouth.
I wonder if he knows that. He does then. He has said it.
Know that, yeah.
Really? Yeah, wow.
He talks about it.
Yeah, it was definitely Bobby. I contribute to, yeah.
But the problem I have with Bobby is why he's the brother. He's the younger brother. Shut the fuck up and listen.
Well, you know what it was, Ange? I make a good argument that it was his nature and he could not help himself. And no matter what, I mean, there are people like that.
I believe that.
Ange, when I was on the street, you'd see a guy sometimes doing things wrong all the time. Somebody goes, he's running a casino maybe, and he's running it with somebody who's a big guy. Yeah. And then the guy's not getting his share and the guy's mad. and you tell the guy, look, why don't you give him a share? You know, this isn't going to end well. You can't rob people. And they keep going and they keep going. Some people can't help themselves, Ange. And then one day you go play cards at the club and, you know, they deal out a hand and somebody walks in the club and says, you know who died? And you know already. Already. You've been waiting for it. So, you know, and you say to yourself, well, why couldn't the guy get the memo? And also, too, even Ange, I'll give you another example in prison. When I was in the penitentiary for years, now and then you get stuck next to a guy. And one time, I'll give you a perfect example. One time I'm in the hole, solitary confinement. I got into a fight. I'm in the hole, solitary confinement. And this guy, he's flushing the toilet and clogging it up and flooding his cell. He's screaming and yelling, banging on the door. And I go over to the cell and I tell the guy, hey, buddy, you know they're going to come in here and beat your brains in, right? And he keeps going and going and going. And he, hey, buddy, you know you're testing them, right? They're going to come in here and beat your brains in, right? You know that's happening. You know it's coming. He couldn't stop. He knows it's coming. He couldn't stop. All of a sudden, I say, wow, look, it's about 20 minutes now. Gee, they're a bit late. Sure enough, they come down, the goon squad, wrapped up like Ninja Turtles. They open the door. They go in there with billy clubs, and they beat his brains, and they literally take him out on a gurney. You know, I don't even know if he's breathing. You're watching him go past your cell door, and you're going, is this guy even alive?
Right, yeah.
You're telling him it's coming, and he can't stop.
Some people just can't help themselves.
That was Bob's nature.
I don't understand that mentality. I just intellectually, psychologically, I don't get the whole thing of like, shut your mouth and just listen. It's going, let this thing work itself out.
That's right.
But you're not helping matters.
100%. And even after the assassination,
incredible.
Bobby sunk into such a deep depression that everyone around him surmised that it wasn't necessarily the ordinary depression you would suffer from a brother, or the ordinary depression you would suffer from an iconic brother who was the president, but it was more so, they believed, a depression you would suffer having blamed yourself for the event. And that's what he was suffering. And I make a great outline in the book, Clash of Titans. I think you got to change it on your tagline too. I think it says Rise of Empire. You got to pop Clash of Titans in there.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
We'll take care. We will take care of that. Let me tell everybody, Lou Ferrante is an expert in the criminal enterprise of heist and hijacking, and a former Gambino Crime Family associate. Lou, let's talk about that for just a second while I fix this up here.
Sure, you got
this is Clash of Titans. Talk to me a little bit about the art of the heist. When I think of heist, I immediately go to Goodfellas and Jimmy Doyle.
Yeah, Jimmy Burke.
Talk to me about why it's so tempting. The art of the heist, let's call it that.
Yeah. So that's first of all, that's all I did. Heists and hijackings. That was my expertise when I was on the street. And I loved it. Probably looking back, I loved the adrenaline rush. I loved the feel. But when I started as a kid, I used to run chop shops. I was, chopping up cars and selling them to auto body collision shops. You make money doing that. And then at one point or another, I realized these tool trucks came to the auto body collision shops, and somebody told me there's about $100,000 worth of merchandise on these trucks. So I said, you want one? He said, sure. That was the first time I realized that instead of nickel and diming it, 1 car, 2 cars, 3 cars, in one shot, in 10 minutes, I could have $100,000 in my pocket, or worth of merchandise. Obviously, I couldn't sell it for that. You have to get a percentage on the dollar. But I realized that I could do that. So I went out, I hijacked a truck, then I hijacked another truck, and I realized it was the fastest, easiest way. You have to realize too, a guy like the boss of my family at that time was John Gotti, right? Yeah. John Gotti started out as a hijacker. The Gambino family controlled the meat industry, the garment industry, the construction industry, but that doesn't mean that they give it out to everybody who's in the family. You earn what you earn. What you get is what you got coming. You don't get anything that they don't say to you, oh, gee, Lou, you're with us now. We want to give you a piece of the garment industry. We want to give you got to go make your own money. Even John Gotti had to make his own money. And that's why John Gotti hijacked. And eventually his crew sold drugs. And that's what caused the rift with Paul Castellano, and they eventually killed him. But the reason for that is because no matter what part of that family you're in, the old timers at that time, when I was on the street, they held control of all of those major multi-million-dollar rackets. And they weren't giving them up for nothing. And that's why once John took over the family, the guys from the lower ranks started to get pieces of that. So that's like a rebellion where, from the bottom where they take. But that doesn't happen all the time. So
that happened in Philadelphia, Lou, years ago with Angelo Bruno. When they took out old man Angelo Bruno, there was an all-out mob war for control of the city.
That's right.
Atlantic City. You had all these factions. You had factions that nobody knew were factions.
Correct.
Which was crazy.
Yep, that's right.
And names were popping up that nobody ever heard of. Like, where'd this guy come from?
Yeah.
Who's he with? Who's this guy with?
Yep, that's right.
I was so bizarre.
I was in Lewisburg Penitentiary with Chicky Changaline.
Father.
Yeah, the father who was he had two sons. One got killed, the other one I think was paralyzed.
Yeah.
But Chicky was a man's man, great guy. And he used to tell me stories, and it's exactly what you just said. I mean, he said, I don't even know half the guys I was talking to half the time. Like they were popping up different factions left and right, like you said. But that's so that when you come up, you got to come up on your own. So I hijacked, but I did good with it. And once I had a name as a heist guy and a hijacker, the family comes to me. So let's say you're a skipper. Let's say you're a capo, right, Ange? Yeah. And the guy comes to you and says, geez, Ange, I know I owe you $500,000. I'm in over my head. I can't afford it, but I got to score. Well, okay. You say, you're a well-established older guy. You say, I'm not going to go put a mask on. What do I do? You would call me. You'd say, Louis, do me a favor. Come by the club tomorrow. I got to talk to you. I would come by the club. We take a walk, talk around the block. And you would say to me, Louis, this guy just gave me a tip. Go check this out. See if it's legit, if it's worth doing. And he's going to pay off his debt. Let me know what you could give me from it because I want some money that he owes me, what you're going to take for your crew. And we talk about it. We talk it out. But I'm the guy who does it. And I put my crew together. I got a great crew. So, we're like a well-oiled machine. We know how to do these things. And that's that's what we went away for. The proof is in my indictment. I eventually went away for heists and hijackings. And I faced the rest of my life because of it. So that's sort of like, that's what we did. And Jimmy Burke, you mentioned, Jimmy Doyle, who was Jimmy Conway, rather, played by Robert De Niro. The real one was Jimmy Burke. He was from the neighborhood I hung out in. And I'll never forget, he had a son, Jesse, who was a legitimate kid, Jesse Burke, one of his sons. He had a son that died, was killed on the street. But he had another one who was a legitimate kid. I think he became a lawyer in the end. Nice kid. He said to me and Peter Gotti one day, he goes, I got this VHS tape. And I don't know if all your listeners are going to remember what VHS is, but he goes, I got a VHS tape and it's my father's movie. It was just given to me. It's not going to come out in the movies for a few months. You guys want to watch it by my house? So we said, yeah, we'll follow you to your house. I sat in his living room and I watched Goodfellas. I never, that was the first time I saw it before anybody saw it because the kid got a copy of it, I guess, through De Niro or whoever. Well, whatever
advanced copy, yeah.
Yeah, but whatever the case was, his father was like an idol of mine, Jimmy Burke. Jimmy Burke was like, some kids looked up to baseball players, basketball players. I did too when I was a little kid. But when I was a teenager, I looked up to a guy like Jimmy Burke. That's who I wanted to be like.
Remarkable. Jimmy Burke. You wanted to be...
Yeah, I remember.
It's funny to think about, who your heroes are. I wanted to be Al Capone when I was a kid. I mean, but this is the kind of shit we grew up with. Yeah. When you finally realized that you could make as much money or more legit, and work without having to break a sweat. Was it an epiphany to you? Did it come as a surprise that you could make this kind of money without risking really anything?
I didn't fit nowhere. Like my father's family, they had auto body collision shops too. So when I was chopping cars, I stayed away from them, obviously. You couldn't go to your own family. I could go to my friend's uncle. I go to my friend's friend. I go to my friend. I can't go to my own uncles, unfortunately. Yeah. And my mother's family, they drove heavy machinery. bulldozers, backhoes, caterpillars. They drove, excavators. So from when I was a little kid, I was always on a bulldozer. That's what my family did. That's probably what I would have done. But I didn't really take to that either. I didn't want to, there was so many things I wanted when I was young, and I was ignorant too. I didn't realize that you need patience. It actually wouldn't have been a bad course for me to take. My cousin now, one of my young cousin, just got a crane license. He'll probably be making over $500,000 a year running a crane, in Manhattan. And he's a good kid. So, and he's legit, by the way. He goes, when I told him, I go, look, I got a friend of mine in the union. I could get you in if you want. He goes, no, I want to do this the right way. I'm going to take the 2-year course. I'm going to go to the school. I go, good for you. My grandfather was crooked. My uncle was crooked. I was crooked. And now he's the next generation. He's completely legit. So, you give people time, and, they come into their own. I think it's, it was a different way of life back then.
I see that in my own family as well. People I grew up with, people that, I'm related to. They have nothing now. Mm-hmm. They scrape by, nickels and dimes. These guys would just as soon nickel and dime you and $20 a week to death,
Yeah.
Then go out and try and work, because that's all they know.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, never had a score.
Mm-hmm.
I was never with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Never had a dollar to my name. But I never went to jail.
Thank God.
I never owed anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I could wake up every day and go to sleep knowing that, I didn't do anything to hurt anybody that day.
Yeah. Well, yours is the life that I wanted to emulate when I came home from jail. So once I was in prison, I said, whether I'm here for 5 years, 10 years, or 100 years, I'm going to be a different person. And I read 18 hours a day while I was in prison. I found books. I never read a book before in my life. I read my first book, and then before you know it, I was reading, a book a day, 18 hours a day. I'd start it in the morning, finish it at night. 300-page book, 600 pages, maybe 2 days, 900, 3 days. But I averaged 3, maybe 400 pages a day. And I said, I'm going to teach myself to do something else when I get out.
Well, that's testified to by that amazing library behind you.
Yeah, I haven't stopped reading, Ange. Imagine if somebody put a book in my hands when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You talk about how much wasted talent there is in this world. Maybe people just need some help.
Well, that's the other thing too. I said no to a guy one time that wanted to do something for me, but I know what the price would have been. Mm-hmm. I've always been in television and radio, and that no cost me a career.
Mm.
So, as many people as watch this show, I'm grateful for the now 17 million subscribers we have.
Wow.
Thankful, and every one of them earned, by the way.
Yeah, incredible.
And none paid for. We didn't bribe anybody to come.
Yeah, incredible.
We ain't got shit for nothing, brother.
You deserve it. As long as I know you, I got to tell you, you deserve it.
Thank you, brother. Yeah. But if you know somebody, let them know that here I am. I want to talk about. We got to do, man. We're already up on the 8 o'clock hour. Holy shit. I got to bring you back for part 2 of this discussion.
Definitely.
I'd got to bring you back. Tomorrow night, I've got such a busy month. I like to can I bring you back, Lou, in February?
Definitely. I love talking about this, Ange. It took me over 10 years to research it. I know everything about it, and I really, really am proud of the conclusions I've drawn and the books that I've written. So I'd love to. Yeah.
You got a friend here in the chat, says Greg Zalbo says, "What's up, Lou?"
Hey, what's up, Greg? How you doing, buddy?
So there's my co-host is homesick. Amelia, I may not be feeling well, but I'm watching. You better watch, lady.
Hey, what's up, Amelia?
She's doing
better. Feel better.
Yeah, she's not feeling well. I'll tell you what. Let me just do this quick break, and I want to come back and tell everybody what's happening tomorrow night. Do you have sweaty balls or volleyball netty balls? It's time to make them ready balls. The Manscaped.com Lawnmower 3.0 will do the job and clean your knob with its patented no-nick head, so your head will function as desired. Enter promo code Wrestling Future for a generous 20% discount. That's enter Wrestling Future for a 20% discount. Manscaped.com and Wrestling with the Future, going balls to the walls with Manscaped.com and the Lawnmower 3.0. Your balls will thank you, and so will we. What's the Buzz? America's Podcast is back with Lou Ferrante, author of Borgata, Clash of the Titans. This is the second book in the Borgata series. And Lou, what's the third book will be titled?
The third book is Autumn of Empire. It's when things start to go downhill. Yeah, really quick. And that was my own.
Why don't we bring it back, Lou? Can we bring it back February 3rd? It's a Monday. Can we do that?
Just when we hop off air, just let me check my schedule. And if I'm free, I'm on, Ange, for sure.
Terrific. Terrific. All right. We have a special guest tomorrow night, folks. Legendary television actress Stephanie Powers will be with us. You remember her from Heart to Heart, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and literally countless television series and films. Stephanie Powers is a legend in the entertainment business. And I mean, if you grew up in the 60s or 70s, you know who Stephanie Powers is.
I loved Stephanie Powers. Heart to Heart. I loved her.
Yeah.
For me. Definitely.
She'll be here tomorrow night. You want to join me?
I should be. I think I'm good before 10. Is that okay?
Should we? 9:00 p.m. is actually the interview tomorrow night.
I could stay on probably for a half hour or so. Is that all right?
You could do that. Absolutely.
Okay. Cool.
I'm going to send you a link for her. Yeah. She's fascinating.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. This is an amazing woman. She's got a home in L.A., London, and Kenya.
Wow.
Of all places, Kenya.
Oh,
she spends 9 months out of the year in Kenya.
Wow. Cool. Yeah.
Lou, I'm going to bring it back in February. I'll send you the date and check your schedule that you're not doing anything then. And I will send you a link for tomorrow night's show.
Sounds good. Can't wait, Ange.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.
Great
and
Thanks,
Amelia,
buddy.
Get yourself well, kid. It's studios is echoing in here without your big mouth.
Feel better, Amelia.
Absolutely. On behalf of Big Lou Ferrante, I'm Mad Dog DeCipio. Thanks for joining us. Join us tomorrow night, 9 p.m. special time with Stephanie Powers. Take care, folks. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.